Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going way back to explore the fascinating histories of blogging. You actually sent us an article from blogudo.com, and it was so interesting we just had to do a deep dive on it. Honestly, I was blown away by just how many blogging platforms existed before social media took over. Some of these platforms are, get this, older than Google.
It was pretty wild, huh?
Yeah.
And taking a look at that evolution isn't just a trip down memory lane. There's a lot we can learn about how technology changes and how online behavior shifts over time. Even how we share and spread information has been influenced by these early platforms.
That's a really good point. The article mentions Open Diary, which was founded in 1998. That was a real pioneer. Can you believe it was one of the very first platforms to have a comment section? Like, that seems so basic now, but back then it was revolutionary.
Absolutely. Open Diary was definitely ahead of its time in creating that sense of community and interaction we now consider essential to blogging. But the idea itself, sharing your thoughts and having a conversation, actually goes back even further. Think about those old Usenet groups and listservs. Those were online spaces where people could have long-form discussions on specific topics, which is very similar to what we see on blogs today, isn't it?
So it's like the fundamental idea of blogging was already out there, just waiting for the right tech to come along and make it easier.
Exactly. And when that technology did arrive in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was like an explosion of creativity. So many platforms started popping up, each with its own twist on online publishing. To really understand all of this, I think we should look at these early platforms through the lens of different trends.
Ooh, I like that. So what's the first trend we'll be exploring?
Let's start with the pioneers, those early platforms that really laid the groundwork for everything that came after. We're talking Blogger, LiveJournal, and of course, Diaryland, which we've already mentioned.
Ugh, Diaryland. The article described it as, let me quote this directly, pure text, no frills. Why was that kind of simplicity so appealing back then?
Well, think about it. The internet was a very different place back then. Connection speeds were slow, bandwidth was limited, and many people were still using dial-up modems. Diaryland's stripped-down approach made it fast and accessible. It was all about getting your thoughts out there quickly and easily.
That makes a lot of sense. No fancy images or videos to slow things down. It's kind of like the precursor to those minimalist writing apps we see today.
That's a great observation. These early platforms really did reflect those evolving ideas about writing and communication online.
Now, the article also mentioned Blogger and LiveJournal as big players in those early days. What set those platforms apart? Weren't they quite different in terms of what they offered?
Oh, absolutely. Blogger, which of course was eventually acquired by Google, was a game changer because it was so user-friendly. It made it incredibly easy for anyone to set up a blog and start publishing. It didn't matter if you had technical skills or not. LiveJournal, on the other hand, really emphasized community. LiveJournal is actually still around, and it has a really devoted following, especially in Russia. Think friends lists, themed communities, and a big focus on interaction between users. In a lot of ways, LiveJournal sort of foreshadowed social media networks, wouldn't you say?
It's interesting how even back then there were different ideas about what blogging should be. Like, was it a simple platform for individual expression or a way to build online communities? Both ideas were already present.
Exactly. And of course, as the internet itself changed, so did these platforms. That desire for more customization and control over your online space led to a whole new wave of blogging platforms.
I love seeing how those early innovations actually led to things we take for granted today. So, what were some of the new features that these later platforms started to offer?
This next wave, let's call it the customization craze, was all about giving users more power to personalize their online space. That's when platforms like Zonga, Movable Type, and TypePad started to emerge. Each of those offered a different level of control over the look and feel of your blog.
I remember Zonga. You could add background music, create wild layouts. It was definitely a different world from the minimalist style of Diaryland.
Yeah, Zonga was a huge hit with younger users, and that focus on personalization was a big part of it. It was like suddenly you could really express your individual style and create this unique online identity. Zonga almost foreshadowed those visual-heavy platforms we see today, where aesthetics are just as important as the content itself.
It's a huge contrast, right? Diaryland was about just the words, and Zonga was all about adding those extra layers of self-expression.
Exactly. And then you had Movable Type and TypePad, which appealed to users who wanted more technical control over their blogs. They weren't as focused on visual design as Zongo was, but they allowed for much greater customization under the hood.
So this was like the early version of choosing between, say, a hosted platform like WordPress.com and a self-hosted one like WordPress.org.
That's a great analogy. Movable Type was self-hosted, meaning you needed some technical knowledge to install and manage it. Typepad, on the other hand, was a hosted service, offering ease of use, but maybe not as much flexibility. Just like today, different platforms cater to different needs and skill levels.
It's wild how much those early platforms were already grappling with the same issues we still deal with today. Are there any other platforms from this era you think are worth mentioning?
You know, there are actually a few lesser-known platforms that I think deserve a shout-out just for their unique approaches. We could call them, I don't know, the hidden gems of the early blogosphere.
Hidden gems. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so there was one called Pivot, which was super unusual because it didn't use a database. That made it incredibly lightweight and really ideal if you had limited hosting resources. Then you had Blog Drive, which was all about being easy for casual users. It was designed to be as simple to use as possible, almost like Blogger for people who didn't even want to figure out Blogger.
Wow, talk about a specific niche.
Right. And then there was Radio Userland, which was really interesting because it was an early adopter of RSS feeds.
Ah, RSS feeds. I haven't thought about those in ages. Before, everyone was just getting their news from, like, what, 3 giant platforms?
I think Radio Userland was ahead of the curve there. They let users syndicate their content, so it was easier for other people to follow their updates. And finally, I have to mention Tinderbox. Tinderbox wasn't really a traditional blogging platform. It was more like, a tool for thought.
A tool for thought. That sounds really different from the platforms we've talked about so far.
It was. Tinderbox wasn't about publishing in the traditional sense. It was all about using things like hypertext and visual maps to connect ideas and organize information. It was really popular with academics, researchers, and anyone who was, really into exploring hypertext.
Wow, it's amazing how much experimentation and innovation was happening back then. People were really pushing the boundaries of what online publishing could be.
It was a really creative and exciting time. But of course, we can't talk about the history of blogging without talking about the platform that eventually became, well, the king of the blogosphere, WordPress.
Absolutely. WordPress powers such a huge chunk of the internet today. It's hard to imagine the web without it. So, how did it become so successful? Let's dive into the rise of WordPress.
WordPress actually launched in 2003. It wasn't the first blogging platform out there, but it became incredibly popular incredibly quickly. And you were right, it powers a massive portion of the internet. I think the number is somewhere around 40%.
I knew it was big, but 40%, that's incredible.
Hmm.
So what made WordPress so successful? What were the key factors?
Well, for starters, it's super flexible.
Yeah.
And it's very user-friendly. WordPress started as a blogging platform, sure, but it's really evolved into a full-blown content management system, CMS. And that means you can build almost any kind of website with WordPress.
That makes a lot of sense. The article mentioned that WordPress is open source. I know that's really important in the tech world, but could you explain that a little bit? Like, for those of us who aren't programmers, why does open source matter?
Okay, so open source basically means that anyone can use, modify, and even distribute the software's code. It's free. That has a few implications. First, it means WordPress is constantly being improved by a global community of developers.
So it's not just one company controlling everything.
Nope. It's a much more collaborative process. That's led to a lot of innovation, I think. Second, being open source means there are tons and tons of free themes and plugins. Think of those as add-ons. They extend the functionality of your website.
Ah, okay. So that's why there are so many WordPress websites that look totally different. You can customize it to such a crazy degree.
Exactly. That ecosystem of themes and plugins is a huge reason why people love WordPress. It doesn't matter if you're a blogger, a small business, a huge corporation, you can find the tools and the design to make it work for you.
So WordPress was booming, offering this user-friendly experience and endless customization. But around the same time, social media platforms were starting to take off. How did the rise of platforms like Facebook and Twitter change the world of blogging?
Well, that period, the mid-2000s, saw a lot of changes in how we communicate online. You had Facebook, Twitter, and then especially Tumblr, which the article mentions as being a big game changer. These platforms introduced new ways to connect and share that definitely had an impact on the blogging world.
I remember Tumblr being so popular, especially with younger people. What was it about Tumblr that felt so different from these earlier blogging platforms?
I think Tumblr really nailed that concept of microblogging. Shorter posts, lots of visuals, quick sharing, that kind of thing. It was definitely a different vibe from the longer blog posts you'd usually see on platforms like Blogger or LiveJournal.
And you could easily share and repost content from other users, so it was a lot more social, right?
Right. Tumblr really blurred the lines between blogging and social networking.
Hmm.
That appealed to a generation that was, growing up online and really comfortable with sharing their lives.
So Tumblr was a game changer for sure. But did the rise of these social media platforms kill traditional blogging, or did those two worlds just learn to coexist?
It's a good question. Social media definitely captured a lot of attention, and it did change the way people were consuming content online. Attention spans got shorter, visuals became more important, and there was this feeling of immediacy that social media really emphasized.
I have to admit, sometimes it's way easier to just scroll through a feed of quick updates than it is to read a long blog post. Even I do it.
Oh, sure, it's super easy. But I wouldn't say blogging is dead. It's more like it got evolved. I think blogs had to become more focused, right? They had to cater to specific audiences or provide really in-depth content that you couldn't get on social media.
So blogs had to find their own place in the ever-expanding world of online content.
Exactly. And I think a lot of them did that really successfully.
Yeah.
Today, we see blogs thriving in all sorts of forms. There are personal websites, company blogs, online publications, and more. Blogs found a way to adapt and offer something valuable in this new world of social media.
The article mentioned platforms like Squarespace, Wix, and Medium as popular choices for bloggers today. What does the current landscape look like?
Well, WordPress is still the king. It's still the foundation for so many of those blogs and websites we see today. But you're right, Squarespace and Wix have definitely become more and more popular. I think a lot of people who prioritize ease of use and design are drawn to those platforms.
It seems like they've really captured that drag-and-drop generation of website builders, haven't they?
I think so. They make it so easy to create a good-looking website. And then you have Medium, which is interesting. It's designed specifically for longer form articles.
So they've doubled down on that in-depth content we were just talking about.
Yep. And they've built a really strong community around this idea of thoughtful writing. They've managed to attract both readers and writers who are looking for something a bit more curated, a bit more in-depth.
It's amazing how all these different platforms are catering to different needs and preferences. But the article made another interesting point, which is that blogging has become a real career path for a lot of people. It's not just a hobby anymore.
Totally agree. Blogging has become a serious professional pursuit for a lot of people. Businesses use blogs for marketing, influencers use them to build their brands, and creative individuals use them to share their work and connect with an audience. The article even mentioned all the different ways bloggers can monetize their content, which we could do a whole other deep dive on.
Oh, yeah. Affiliate links, sponsored posts, ads. It's a whole world unto itself. But the biggest takeaway for me is how blogging has changed the way we communicate. It's given so many people a voice and a platform to share their ideas.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's been a real pleasure tracing the evolution of blogging. From those early online diaries to the diverse landscape we see today, it's a testament to how much our world has changed.
It really makes you wonder what the future holds. Will the platforms we've talked about stick around? Will some new technology come along and disrupt everything all over again? What do you think, dear listener? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
It's mind-blowing to think how far blogging has evolved, right? From those early days of online diaries to the rise of social media, the potential of AI, and people are even making a living from blogging. But I can see how it could be a bit overwhelming for someone who's completely new to all of this. Where do you even begin if you want to create your own blog?
That's a really good question, and it's one I get asked a lot. I think the most important thing is to start with a clear sense of purpose. Like, what are you hoping to achieve with your blog? Is it a personal journal, a community space, a platform for sharing expertise?
So you're saying it's crucial to really understand why you want to blog before you even start thinking about the how. Exactly. That why is going to guide everything you do, from the platform you choose to the kind of content you create. And once you know your why, well, then the fun part begins. You can start experimenting and finding your own voice.
Because there's so many different approaches to blogging, right? Some blogs are super personal, others are focused on sharing information.
Right. There's no one right way to do it. The key is to be authentic, to be yourself, and to create something you're genuinely passionate about.
The article we talked about also stressed the importance of consistency. Why is that so crucial for building a successful blog?
Well, blogging is a marathon, not a sprint. It really takes time to build an audience and establish yourself as a credible voice. So whether you choose to post once a week, twice a week, or every day, the key is to pick a schedule you can realistically maintain and stick to it.
So it's better to post less frequently but consistently than to go all in for a few weeks and then burn out, right?
Absolutely. When you're consistent, it shows your readers that you're serious about your blog and that you're reliable. They know they can count on you to deliver fresh content. Plus, consistency helps with things like search engine optimization, SEO, which can make it easier for people to actually find your blog online.
That's a really good point. It can be so discouraging to put all this effort into creating a post and then not see much engagement. But you're reminding me that it's a long-term commitment. It takes time to grow an audience.
It does. And don't forget about promoting your blog, too. Sharing on social media can be really helpful. The more people know about your blog, the more potential readers you'll attract.
This conversation has been so eye-opening. It's amazing to see how far blogging has come and to think about all the different ways it's being used today. But before we wrap up, I want to come back to something you mentioned earlier about AI. How do you see AI shaping the future of blogging?
Yeah, AI is the big question mark right now, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's changing so many aspects of how we create and consume content. And it's definitely going to have an impact on the blogging world.
Some people seem to think that AI will eventually be able to write blog posts that are just as good as those written by humans. Do you think that's really possible?
It's a question a lot of people are asking. AI has gotten so sophisticated. But I think there will always be a need for the human touch in blogging.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I think there's a special kind of magic that happens when a human being shares their thoughts and experiences in their own unique voice.
Right. AI can create grammatically perfect sentences,
Mm-hmm.
but it can't replicate human emotion and empathy.
Hmm.
It can't capture those nuances of storytelling that really connect with readers.
So do you envision a future where human bloggers and AI kind of dot work together?
I think it's very likely, yeah. We're already seeing AI being used for things like keyword research, grammar and spelling checks, even coming up with blog post ideas. These AI tools can be super helpful. They can free up time for human bloggers to focus on what we do best.
Which is crafting compelling stories and connecting with our readers in a genuine way.
Exactly. It's a great combination, using technology to help us be more efficient without sacrificing that personal connection that makes blogging so special.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. We've covered so much ground today. It's incredible to see how far blogging has evolved and to think about all the possibilities that still lie ahead.
It really highlights the power of sharing our voices and connecting with each other online.
And on that note, we want to hear from you, dear listener. What are your thoughts about the future of blogging? Do you think traditional blogs will continue to thrive? Will AI take over? Head over to our website or our social media pages and share your predictions. We'd love to hear what you think.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of blogging. We'll see you next time.